It's time now for Mental Health Matters with your host, Lisa Reimer. Mental Health Matters is graciously underwritten by New Vision Eye Center, world-class eye care on the Treasure Coast. New Horizons thanks Dr. Paul Minotti, Dr. Stephen Tate, Dr. Robert Reinauer, and Dr. David O'Brien. Now, here's Lisa Reimer.
Welcome to today's edition of Mental Health Matters. Ann Lotierzo sitting in today for Lisa Reimer. Today's topic, breaking down the stigma associated with mental illness. Joining me today in this discussion is Natalie Holtzman. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, appreciate you taking time. Natalie currently serving as the team leader for the Mobile Crisis Response Team, but previously having worked at New Horizons in the capacity of emergency screener. And
Yes.
then your career extends further back to working as a therapist at another agency, dealing primarily with outpatient and groups. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So my whole career has been in mental health and substance abuse, ranging from outpatient services, PSR groups, individual therapy, all the way to currently in an inpatient environment.
Okay, so a wide range of experience there. So perfect person to join us in the discussion today. We see that stigma that is associated with mental illness throughout all areas of society. I think it's interesting when you compare a mental illness to a physical illness, the reactions that you observe in people. And some examples that I've witnessed is, and I think we've talked about these things, is when someone's ill with, a diagnosis of leukemia or some other form of cancer,
Right.
and you see the community really rally behind them.
Right. So for an example, if someone's diagnosed with a physical illness, they might rally around and do like a Facebook group. Fundraisers, exactly. So there's more of rallying around and support if there's a physical illness, but you don't really see that when someone has mental health issues going on. You don't see a fundraiser if someone was recently diagnosed with depression or anxiety.
Right, or something more severe like schizophrenia.
Yes.
It really, instead of seeing the rally and maybe the fundraisers or the support, the encouragement from the community, sadly, we see the opposite. We see isolation.
Right.
They are ostracized by the community, by society in general. There's almost an unspoken fear of that person, and yet all the cheerleading we do to say mental health affects everyone, mental illness affects everyone, we still are faced with that stigma in society. And I think what you point out about the rallying around the Facebook, it's very common to just scroll through Facebook, and you'll always see so many fundraisers for individuals recently diagnosed with cancer or leukemia or was in a terrible car accident.
Right.
Yet those that are really, truly as vulnerable are those that are facing any kind of mental illness. And some of the more chronic ones, they're not going to get much better. They will establish what we would call in the field a baseline, and then probably need some kind of support the rest of their lives, and yet community shuns them.
Right.
So
this is why, having this radio show is so important, because it's getting the message out there that mental health can affect anyone, and let's talk about it. Let's figure out solutions and make it not a taboo topic.
Exactly. I think that's key. What you say there is let's talk about it. So let's do that. So some of the statistics show that some of the more common experiences of mental illness are depression and anxiety, with affecting large percentages of the population at any given time. We know from just our own personal lived experiences, life happens.
Right.
Death, job changes, moves, divorce, relationships break up. And we see the onset of sometimes mild symptoms, but sometimes more severe.
Right.
And in looking out that spectrum, it's when would you say is the perfect time for someone to seek treatment?
Well, let's start with breaking down what, mental health is. And it refers to our cognitive, behavioral, and emotional well-being. And that affects anyone.
Right.
So I would say every situation is different for, any individual. So maybe a car accident for myself isn't traumatic, but for someone, it could be. So we just don't know what type of situation could produce exacerbated symptoms of mental health issues to someone.
Right. Even like the loss of a pet,
Right.
we are very
Yes.
live so closely with our animals and our pets here in the United States of America. Pets are like a member of the family.
Right.
And that is loss. Well, whereas we always expect it, we know about it, it doesn't change the fact that you'll enter into a grieving period. My concern always is when there are people experiencing any type of mental illness, be it something as a mild symptom of depression or anxiety, that they keep it to themselves for fear of the stigma, fear of being ostracized, fear of being feared, really, because there is that I think underlying sense that having some type of mental illness is not acceptable.
Right.
And yet we look at what happens when it's not treated.
Exactly.
We've seen, sadly, some very tragic instances where someone with a mental illness has not had any kind of treatment whatsoever, maybe isn't even aware fully of their diagnosis, and then there is sometimes a tragic outcome to those types of cases and those scenarios.
Exactly.
So your work with the mobile crisis team, of course, is to intervene when there is a crisis. But what about before that? We go to the doctor for our physical checkups, likely once a year or something. But what kind of recommendations can you offer listeners to treating or preventing serious mental illness?
Well, I would start with having self-awareness and noticing if you're having some changes. Are you sleeping more? Not having as much energy as you used to, not having pleasure in activities that you used to. Maybe you've noticed that you've been isolating yourself. If you're starting to see unusual behaviors that you're not used to, I would start to have that conversation of, what's going on? Something doesn't feel right, so let me start having this conversation.
That's a great piece of advice. Warning also for parents of young children when they see any kinds of changes in behaviors, isolating more, spending more time in their room, maybe not displaying the same level of appetite, not having the sleep, any kinds of those changes. Those are easy enough to look for and may not be a red flag, but maybe certainly a sign that it would be
Right.
time. Now, in terms of seeking therapy, I think nowadays it's easy enough to just jump on the internet and Google and look for
Right.
local therapists. Of course, always could call New Horizons or jump on our website because we have services in all the surrounding counties of Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, and Okeechobee. And we do offer those therapy services there. But if you're looking for something different, then jumping on Google to get started is not a bad idea, really. It brings you in. Most therapists these days seem to offer websites
That's
and
correct.
free consultations.
Right.
So in your work with outpatient therapy, what would you see as some of the common reasons people would seek therapy services?
Well, I would say that their symptoms are affecting their day-to-day lifestyle. It could be impacting their work. their relationships with family, significant others, friends, and their mental health symptoms could also be affecting their physical health as well.
Right.
I'd like to say that mental health is a team effort. So you made a really good point where parents should also be aware of signs and symptoms of different behaviors for the children as well. You know, you hear like it takes a village to raise a child. It's the same way with mental health too. You know, someone can't do it alone. They need a support system.
Absolutely. That's a good point. It's interesting as we do our intakes, we always are asking those types of questions for individuals that come in seeking help, is, you know, trying to understand and build what is the support system and, you know, what ways that they can address that if it's a weak link, in, you know, in the picture. So it takes a village, but a village isn't going to pick up the phone and call for you, right? So what does someone expect that first day? They pick up the phone, they may get a secretary in an office or something, and then they're faced with disclosing these very personal, private issues. I think if you can get through that hurdle of just saying, hey, I need someone to talk to. I'm looking for help. I'm looking for assistance. Or I just, maybe something even more bland than that. And just, I'd like to schedule an appointment, an initial appointment, and then move from there into hopefully a good, solid relationship. We'll be coming up on our first break here, but we'll be back to talk more about breaking down the stigma of mental illness. Don't go away.
The Cataract Institute at New Vision Eye Center offers the most advanced technology available for patients with cataracts. Gentle, bladeless, computer-guided cataract removal. Our advanced laser system is designed to deliver the best visual results with unsurpassed accuracy and efficiency. No two eyes are the same, not even yours. That's why we use the very own image-guided system to obtain a fingerprint of your eye before your cataract procedure. Doctors Minotti and Tate offer the safest and most efficient technique for cataract removal and permanent intraocular lens implant. Patients are personally counseled on the best approach for their needs and lifestyle. There are multifocal lenses that allow for distance vision and reading, or toric lenses to correct astigmatism. Call New Vision Eye Center for a consultation or second opinion. Your eyesight deserves world-class eye care. Visit newvisioneyecenter.com or call 772-257-8700. That's New Vision Eye Center in Vero Beach.
Did you know that when you wash your clothes at Sunshine Laundries, you may be doing more than getting your clothes clean? You may be helping a local charity. Hi, Tom Rhodes here, owner of Sunshine Laundries. That's right, from now until December 31st, Sunshine Laundries is donating 25% of the gross proceeds from a select washer at our 5 Indian River and St. Lucie County laundromats to United Against Poverty. Visit sunshinelaundries.com for the specific locations and hours and support United Against Poverty.
This year, let the professionals at Premier Landscape Solutions enhance your property's curb appeal. Our expert design team can help turn your tired landscaping into the perfect backyard and create a customized care plan that will keep your property looking great year-round. 772-925-0030. Visit our website at verobeachlandscaping.com. From bare bones to beautiful, let us transform your space today.
We don't make excuses, we make results. Premier Landscape Solutions.
It's time to call Easy Brew Coffee and Bottled Water Service and learn just how much you can save and how convenient it is to have your coffee and bottled water delivered right to your home or office. In addition to water coolers, Easy Brew offers individual bottles of water in 8 or 16-ounce bottles. No more lugging it home or dragging it into the office. Serving the Treasure Coast for over 2 decades, 2 letters, 1 simple name. Easy for Easy Brew. Visit e-zbrew.com or call 800-792-3285. Easy Brew.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. Ann Lotierzo sitting in today for Lisa Reimer. Continuing discussion in the studio today with Natalie Holtzman, the team leader of the Mobile Crisis Response Team at New Horizons. We just started our discussion earlier about the stigma associated with mental illness and how it does seem to still remain, despite so many efforts to challenge it and to educate people. And that's, I think, a little bit about your job as a team leader at New Horizons for the mobile crisis team. You're in the community educating people about the resources that we have at New Horizons, but also educating them on what mental illness actually is. And I think, although we have a long way to go, I think to breaking down the barriers and the stigma and fear associated with it locally, I think we are making some headroads into clearing that up. Would you agree?
Oh, I agree. It starts with a conversation, and that's what we're having. And just making it normal that, people go through things. And sometimes we're uncomfortable because maybe we haven't experienced that, but that's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's come up with a plan and figure out how to support and help someone so they can, achieve what they want to achieve.
I think, even when people talk about the idea of having a therapist, it's interesting comparing that, the mental health to physical health. People will give referrals, friends will refer this, they use this doctor, this dentist, and make that referral to a friend. But when it comes to therapy, it is, as you said earlier, still a little taboo to think about having a therapist. And yet we do physical checkups every year. Why not mental health checkups as well?
Right. So you might get someone's looking for a therapist, and someone may not want to disclose that they are seeing a therapist, even though they'd probably like to recommend that therapist,
right.
Since they're getting help. So there's still a little bit of a, embarrassment maybe, or, nervousness how someone would feel knowing that, the individual's in therapy. But the good thing is therapy helps and it works. And that's what it's about, is helping. So having these conversations and opening up, talks about mental health is going to be really imperative to kind of break down those barriers and stigma of mental health.
I think when someone thinks about seeing a therapist, all sorts of, things come to mind about what that experience might be. And the reality is it's probably one of the most simple, professional relationships that there is to have. It really focuses so much on just talking.
Right.
We see the benefit of talking, and that, and that person is in some senses, I think, a guide.
Yes.
And, if there are some of those issues that creep up, like the common ones we should all by now expect in life, grief and loss and separation and conflicts, then to have that therapist already in place as someone you already see it's ideal, really. It's like we know what the difficulty is to suddenly become sick and you don't have a doctor that you use regularly. Unfortunately, you wind up in an urgent care or an ER. And the same sort of dilemma can hit you if you don't have a therapist. All of a sudden you have a crisis.
Right.
But fortunately, New Horizons sees and plans ahead in that regard, because if you do have a crisis, a mental health crisis, New Horizons is there.
That's right. We have our mobile crisis team, which is available 24/7 to anyone who's in need in our Treasure Coast, regardless of being already an established patient of New Horizons. So yes, would we love to avoid crisis? Sure. But sometimes we can't. And that's why we have mobile crisis teams set up. So we go into the community. We go to schools, homes, hospitals, anywhere in the Treasure Coast that someone is in need. And we can provide immediate assessment, referrals, support, interventions, anything that's needed to try to help have that person not be in a crisis. And we're also educating too when we're on these calls, because again, like we talked about earlier, it's trying to see the signs and symptoms before it leads to a crisis.
I think the idea of being available 24/7 is so significant, because I've always found it very restricting that in so many offices, whether it's doctor, dentist, therapist, that there's that time schedule of 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, and you try to fit everything in there, and the busy lives that people lead, it's often difficult to do that. So you have a mobile crisis available 24/7, including all holidays, weekends. And,
Yes.
And you have that wonderful resource, just a real treasure that New Horizons offers. And I think the important thing to point out, too, is it's free. It's free, and it is available just by picking up the phone. So it's very significant that we can, in fact, do that and offer that. One of the things you mentioned is providing resources for those individuals. So someone wants a therapist, and is that something that Mobile Crisis can facilitate?
Yes, we can. We have a designated employee who is in a position called a care coordinator position, and she does our follow-ups. So we don't just stop at the initial call. We are following up with the person within 72 hours. Majority of the time, it's the next day. And we're checking in on the person and seeing if they're okay. Mm-hmm. And we're asking them, do you feel like your crisis is not at a crisis level anymore? How are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then in that conversation, we are making sure that if they need a therapist, then we can offer resources, link them to services in the community, not just New Horizons. Mm-hmm. Any facility that provides therapeutic services, we can, help them get the information, get the registration forms, and help them with the appointment. We've even gone to outpatient before. We had an individual who had never had outpatient services before, very nervous. And we sat with them at an outpatient office, waiting with them until their therapy appointment was ready.
Oh, okay.
And then we, after they left, we met them again and just asked them how they were and how they're doing. Mm-hmm. So Mobile Crisis is great because we have the flexibility to be there 24/7 and to also support them even after that initial contact with them.
It is a very flexible program because as the things you even just mentioned there, meeting someone at their therapy appointment, there's really how many other programs or agencies can really facilitate something like that. But New Horizons always on the cutting edge of, breaking down the barriers and making the services accessible. I think that is so key and so critical to understand as a consumer and as a professional in the field, that making services accessible also contributes to breaking down the stigma of mental health, because it's something that is readily available. It's if you make it more accessible and available to individuals, to the residents of the Treasure Coast community, they will start to seek out those services.
Right. And the key word is accessible, because we have our screening department that's also 24/7. So at any time, someone can come to our Midway campus, ring the doorbell, and have an evaluation. But for some people who aren't ready to ring that doorbell, maybe for stigma, maybe they haven't sought mental health services before.
Maybe they just don't have transportation.
They might not have transportation. Mm-hmm. That's where Mobile Crisis can come in, and we can provide those screening services out in the community.
Absolutely. So that's why I love the concept of that big Department of Assessment Services, because it continues to focus on the mission of New Horizons. It is, in my opinion, the perfect embodiment of the mission, because it does provide those services and ensure that they are accessible to whomever is in need. And I think that's very significant in that department. Of course, I may be a little partial to that department, but it is so significant that you can say to someone who is in need, no matter what, we are going to be there for you.
Yeah.
And I think that is something for New Horizons to be very proud of, and serving the community the way that New Horizons does across the Treasure Coast. And just a reminder that services are available 24/7. Just pick up the phone, 772-672-8470. Easiest way to reach us. Happy to help, and at any time, day or night. And so thank you, Natalie, for joining us today. We hope you'll be back again for another edition of Mental Health Matters. Thank you.